morning, everyone. Today, we're re-diving into an excerpt from one of the most important novels of the 20th century, George Orwell's 1984. Now, you're only reading this one chapter, so I want to make sure you have everything you need to understand what's happening and why it matters. First, let's talk about where we are, too. This story takes place in Oceania, a totalitarian society where the government controls absolutely everything. And I mean everything. What you say, what you do, even what you think. The government is led by a figure called Big Brother. You've probably heard that phrase before, Big Brother is watching. Well, this is where it comes from. The ruling party uses an ideology called ING-SOC, short for English, socialism, and they maintain power through constant surveillance and by manipulating information. Our main character is Winston Smith. He works at a place called the Ministry of Truth. Now here's the irony, despite its name. The Ministry of Truth has nothing to do with truth. It's actually the propaganda department. Winston's specific job. He rewrites history. Every single day, he goes to work and changes historical records to match whatever the party says is true right now. In the chapter you're reading, we watch Winston do his job. He receives messages telling him to rectify their word for falsify various articles in old newspapers. For example, Big Brother made a prediction that turned out to be wrong. Winston rewrites the old speech, so Big Brother was actually correct all along. The chocolate ration is being cut, but the government promised it wouldn't be. Winston changes the old promise to a warning that it might be cut. He makes these changes. The original documents go down something called a memory hole, basically a chute to an incinerator. The originals are burned. The new versions become the only versions. And now, there's no evidence that history was ever different. The most chilling part, Winston actually invents a person named Comrade Ogilvy, fake hero who never existed, and inserts him into the historical record to replace someone who's been erased. Let's break down some important terms you'll encounter. Memory holes are these chutes where documents are destroyed. They symbolize how the past is literally erased. And persons are people who've been eliminated from society and erased from all records, as if they never existed. Newspeak is a simplified version of English, designed to limit how people can think and express themselves. Less vocabulary means less ability to form complex or rebellious thoughts. And rectify is the euphemism they use instead of saying lie or falsify. Naughties, how language disguises what's really happening. You might be thinking, this is pretty extreme. Why are we reading this in business English? Great question. This chapter actually connects to several important business and professional concepts. First, language manipulation. Look at how organizations use euphemisms, downsizing instead of firing people, rectifying instead of lying. Words matter. Second, information control and ethics. In any professional role, you might handle sensitive information. What are your ethical responsibilities? Third, documentation practices. Accurate record keeping is crucial in business. This shows what happens when it's perverted. Source: workplace culture. The Ministry of Truth shows an extreme version of a toxic workplace where employees participate in unethical practices without question. And finally, organizational narratives. Every company tells a story about itself. How honest is that story? Who controls it? As you read this chapter, I want you to think about these questions. How do modern organizations control narratives through selective information? Think about corporate PR, social media management, or even how your school presents itself. What ethical responsibilities do employees have when they're asked to present information in misleading ways? How does euphemistic language calling things by softer names allow unethical practices to continue? And here's a big one. Can you think of real-world examples where historical records have been altered or information has been selectively presented? One last thing before you read. Orwell wrote this novel in 1949, right after World War II, when he was worried about totalitarian governments and propaganda. But the reason we're still reading it today, over 75 years later, is because these questions about truth, power, and information control are still incredibly relevant. Pay attention to how Winston feels about his work, how the system operates, and what it all means for a society when truth becomes whatever those in power say it is. Alright, you're ready to read. Take your time with this chapter, there's a lot happening. And we'll discuss it together after you're done. Good luck!